Well, welcome to Homeward. I'm Jim Burns, and one of our most important values here at Homeward is keeping faith alive and building a spiritual legacy. I mean, that's what we talk about all the time. I would imagine one of the reasons why you're a subscriber to our podcast or you listen to our podcast, you may be new, so welcome, but is because of that. And that today is what we're going to be talking about with my very good friend, Dudley Chancey. He's written a brand new book. I'm showing it on the YouTube channel right now called Keeping Faith Alive, Grandparents and Godly Legacy. Boy, has that gotten important in my life since I now have a 10-year-old, a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And Dudley's research has found that grandparents are our best kept secret in faith formation. We're finding out so much more about this with, having a relationship with grandparents. And I realize some of you don't have grandparents who can do that. We did. Kathy and I grew up without a home like that. But obviously, like I said, everybody doesn't have a godly grandparent, but one day you can become one, or you can align yourself with, your own parents and in-laws and kind of make that happen a little better. Adopt a grandparent in your church. Do whatever it takes. I just read today that grandparents aren't just babysitters, that kids with involved grandparents have a 30% lower risk of depression, fewer behavior issues, higher empathy. I mean, that's amazing. So as I mentioned, Dudley Chancey is my good friend. We have known each other for years and years. I respect him greatly, and he is such an encourager of people. I just prayed before this event with him, before our little podcast, and I just thanked God for him because he's that person. You feel special when you're in his presence. He heads up the Intergenerational Faith Center at Oklahoma Christian University. Before that, he served as a professor of youth and family ministry. He has equipped a generation of pastors and youth pastors, youth ministers within his denominational leadership. I don't think their church calls it a denomination, but I just did. Anyway, Dr. Dudley Chancey, I've never called you that before. Welcome to Homeward. So great to have you with us on the podcast today.
Hey, thank you for letting me be here.
Yeah. Doctor. Man,
Yeah.
I don't usually call you that.
I don't know about, I've called you Dr. Jim Burns to everybody.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Homeward, our office was right by a pediatrician office, and they'd go, "Are you the doctor?" They thought I was the pediatrician. I go, "Oh, you don't want me checking your kid out." Anyway, you and I both have a youth ministry background. And so many of us who started in youth ministry, in many ways, have made a transition to family ministry, which you did in a great job. But now that has kind of caused the transition here to from working directly with kids to impacting parents and grandparents. What was that for you? What was that like for you to make that transition?
Yeah, this book came about 2 or 3 different reasons, but the main one was Vicki and I became grandparents, and we were very blessed and are very blessed. Our 2 sons they love Jesus probably more than we do, and they're very involved in their church and their small
Which is
groups.
not always the norm, by the way. So we want to get your secret sauce on this one.
And so, they grew up devotional time every night at 10 o'clock on our bed, praying, reading the Bible, talking, and they've continued that with their children.
Yeah.
And, we figured out how can we best pass our faith on to our grandchildren.
Right.
What we know, Jim, is that, and you know this from Christian Smith's studies, soul searching, and other studies, parents are the number one influence in kids' lives. And so being a grandparent and thinking that I might be the number one influence in their life, I'm thinking the wrong way.
Sure.
And so, how can I, as a grandparent, help empower my sons to be great dads and my daughter-in-laws to be great moms to my grandchildren? And then there's several things you can do as a grandparent to affect their faith also.
I appreciate that you said come alongside your own children, because a lot of times we think, well, we do this better than they do, so we'll just go do it. But in reality, if we can come alongside our own kids, that's the power. And like you say with these studies, the most important influence in a kid's life when you ask kids would be mom and then dad, but then grandparents. And there's always those people where there's that praying grandparent or the encouraging grandparent or the fun grandparent. The one you were saying before the podcast that you'll do things when your grandkids are over, and you guys will have your own, devotions and things like that. Wayne Rice's new book, Seriously, which I
Yeah,
love.
we
You
love it.
yeah, just great. So doing that, but really, you don't replace your kids, is what I hear you
No,
saying.
right.
Yeah,
We empower them, enable them, whatever the word would be,
yeah.
to be the best parents they
Sure.
can be.
Sure, sure. Now you've done some research. The book I thought really interesting. Keep Faith Alive: Grandparents and a Godly Legacy. And I'm holding it up. I'm suggesting people go and pick it up. We don't read many books about grandparenting, and now there's some good ones out there, and this is a great one. Um, but you did some research in this that led you to write about keeping faith alive and godly grandparents. What did you learn from some of that research? That did anything surprise you or get you excited?
Yeah, probably, especially being male, um, there's several scholarly articles out there about grandfathers. So I wrote a whole chapter about
Yeah,
grandfathers, and I
yeah,
had a friend write a chapter about grandmothers. But the
yeah.
interesting thing was, as men get older,
Mm,
we actually become warmer.
yeah.
We become more compassionate,
Mm,
uh, and that makes us very attuned to being
yeah.
nicer to our not only everybody we come in
Right.
contact with. And so the effect that a grandfather can have was amazing. And even the grandfathers in our study, what they did. And then there's a chapter in there about hearing the grandchildren talk. I actually interviewed
Loved it.
about a
Yeah.
hundred and something
Yeah.
college students
Right.
about their grandparents,
Yeah.
and to hear those students talk about their grandfather
Yeah. Very insightful.
first before
Right.
they talked about their grandmother,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all the things they saw their grandfather do, their grandfather praying with them, reading
Mm,
scripture with them, talking
yeah.
about God. Um, I can't, if nobody hears anything else from this
Yeah.
deal, they need to encourage grandfathers to
Right.
be on their A game.
Yeah. That was interesting in your research because, again, that hit me too, Dudley. And, you hear about the praying grandma a lot, and we are going to talk a little bit more at the end. I've got another question if I can get to it on grandfathers because you wrote a great chapter on that. But it's fascinating to me that they are more tender because
Yes,
I'll hear people say, "Oh, that wasn't my dad.
right.
That's the granddad."
Yeah,
And I had James, who's our 10-year-old, and he goes, "Papa Jay, you cry sometimes," and I do.
right.
Because
Yeah,
I'll start talking. Guy just teared up. 'Cause just I'm thinking about him or whatever, and I just love him so much, and so I cry. He's like, and I'm sure his dad doesn't do that. His
yeah,
dad's a great guy, but
yeah.
my he's married to my daughter. But the funny part is that he probably isn't crying. You cry a lot, Papa J. Well, I don't cry a lot. It's kind of almost embarrassing. So you grew up in a home without. Oh, I no. So I grew up in a home without much faith legacy. My parents were good people. They weren't horrible people. I didn't get beat. All that, but faith legacy, we just didn't have that. And what do you say to the couple that didn't grow up with a faith legacy, the grandparent? And they have no background on how to do grandparenting because
Yeah,
in terms of building a faith legacy. What do you say to them?
yeah. Well, I did several Zoom interviews before I did the Survey Monkey that I sent out to
Mhm.
1,500 people, and, uh, when a grandparent would say, "All right, we confess, we've not done this, we've not done it," and I said, "Have you confessed that to your children?
Yeah.
Have you repented?" If you wanna use that word, but
Yeah.
but I tell a lot of people that's where it starts, especially parents with their teenage children, when they hear that Vicky and I have been doing devotionals with our boys for we still do it. They're 40 years old, and they come to our
Amazing.
house at 10 o'clock at night, they get it again.
Amazing.
And so, they say, "How do you start?" And I tell you can't just tell your teenage kid, "All right, tonight we're gonna start doing a devotion." They'll hate you.
Yeah.
But you go to your kids and say, "Hey, we've not made this a priority. We repent. We're sorry we did
Mm.
that, and
Yeah.
starting tonight, we're going to start doing
Yeah.
this. And you're welcome to come if you want to. We're not going to make you." But eventually, they will walk in and sit there and do that.
Yeah.
Because you didn't force them to.
Right.
But you also admitted that This has not been a part of our life. And what, you know, Christian Smith and them found, if it's not important to the parent, it will be less important to the kids.
Yeah, sure.
One thing in our house, all of our grandchildren know what orange and white means,
Mhm.
and it means Tennessee, and they
I'm
know that.
unfamiliar with that university, I'm sorry.
It's ingrained in them,
Yeah,
orange and white. We were getting pumpkins last night with all of our grandkids at this
yeah,
church, and my little 2-year-old granddaughter, she said, "Papa D, look, orange and white." And they had pumpkins, orange and white pumpkins.
unbelievable.
And she just goes, "This is Tennessee. We're in
Yeah.
Tennessee."
You
Uh,
Tennessee types. Hey, Tony Campolo and I were speaking at a youth specialties event, and somebody gave us 2 tickets to go to a Tennessee, Georgia
oh,
state,
wow.
and we sat in the middle of this section where men had on, I don't know if they still do this, but they had on orange sport coats. The women were all in orange. And Tony, as only he could say, he's now passed on, of course, but he said, "This is a cult.
It
These
is.
Tennessee people are cults."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
loved how he said that.
and they sing Rocky Top a cappella, just want you to know
Crazy.
that.
That is just crazy. Going back to the idea of faith legacy and
Yeah,
moving it to the forefront. Um, and again, when it's not natural, it's harder. But to build a faith legacy, say somebody says, "You know what, we haven't done this like we'd like to," and you just said a way to start. Are there are are there things like do this, make it short, make it simple, don't do it every day, but do it once a week, or how does it work? What's the best way to you're moving it from the back burner to the forefront, just on a super practical way?
yeah, I think, once again, not cramming it down their throat
Yeah.
and showing that it's important to you, and, probably only, about 5% of the people in this study had ever verbally told their faith story to their
Yeah.
grandchildren. A lot of them said, "Well, I go to church. They see me go to church.
Mhm.
If they're here, we go to church." And that's a start. But Amanda Drury wrote the book Saying is Believing,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
she's been to our NCYM. And her research showed that teenagers that hear testimonies, that hear faith
Yeah.
stories, are more
Yeah.
likely to remain faithful.
Yeah.
And so at some point, you just start out small. And it's like it's the Deuteronomy 6 thing: when you walk in, when you lie down, when you get up, when you go to
Mm.
Walmart, when you go to school, when you're making cookies together, something is about God. You just
Yeah.
start getting that language in there,
Right.
slowly filtering in. I mean, our grandkids do not leave our house without knowing and hearing that Jesus loves them, even after we've done all the other
Sure.
devotional
Sure.
stuff or whatever.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
when we put them in the car, we kiss them, hug them, and say, "Jesus loves you." They
That's neat.
they
And
they just
grandparents
know
can do
that.
that. We can be a little bit more mushy. We can, that's not preachy by any means, but we can be
Right.
a little bit more like Jesus loves you, where, parents aren't going to go, "Hey, did you do your homework?" And Jesus loves you. I mean, it's
Right.
harder.
Yeah.
We can do that kind of stuff. Now, some grandparents talk to me about the fact that their kids have wandered away. And you didn't write much about this in this book, but I think you have some good insight. I just sense you do. So the kids have kind of wandered away. Some report that their children won't even allow them to bring them to church if they're staying it there, or talk about Jesus. What's your advice to the grandparent who goes, "Yeah, that's fine that I don't have a home like Dudley and Vicky have. Our home is we're not really even allowed to talk to our grandkids about this." What do you say to them?
Well, 2 or 3 different couples talked to me during this research, that they can't see their grandchildren,
Mhm.
and they talked about different ways that they've tried to do that, and been there's a concept called the gatekeepers. It's in the literature. We found it in our study,
Mhm.
that your children can keep you from seeing your grandkids.
Yeah.
Now, what we found in our study was, thanks to technology, as much as we hate it,
Mhm.
uh, a lot of those grandparents that couldn't physically see their grandkids,
Yeah.
they're texting.
Sure. Yeah.
They're texting Bible verses and things like
Yeah.
that. One couple told me the most important time of their life, they can see their grandkids 2 hours on Christmas Day
Wow.
once a year,
Wow.
and that's the most important
Wow.
2 hours in their life.
Mm.
Um, and so they don't go cramming it down and all,
Right.
bringing them Bibles and things like that, but they spend, because they know when they're 18, that we'll have full access to
Yeah,
those
right.
kids.
Yeah,
And so texting Bible verses and things like that is one way. They can Zoom
sure.
sometimes. So there's a lot of different ways they've
Yeah,
been able to
and
get.
we have to be careful. I agree with you on all of that. We do have to, if the parents say absolutely no, no
Yeah,
texting Bible verses, then we don't do it. But the
yeah,
interesting side to it is we're in it for the long haul. So as our kids do get older, that is a case. I was having a conversation with a mutual friend of ours today because he's going to be on the podcast next week. He wrote a book called Long Distance Grandparenting, our good friend
yes,
Wayne Rice. And his wife, Marcy, has an hour conversation with one of their adult grandchildren because he's older, and she, they're in that stage, has an adult conversation, and now that they're 18 they can have different types of conversations. They're an adult, but they had been practicing it for a long time, and we didn't get into this particular detail about faith issues, but what you're right on is we build the relationship for the long haul, and they know who we are, they know what we're about. And a lot of times I see that people will say, it was that praying grandma, that praying grandpa, um, over the long haul. Even in terms of, I have a story that I actually told already on one of the other podcasts, but my daughter, Heidi has a son named Huxley. I love the name. And Huxley's 5, and I do my prayers every day in a journal. And so one day I said to Huxley, I said, look, here's your name. I pray for you every day. And Huxley was like, really, really? That was neat. He doesn't really understand that he's only 5. And I think I probably did this when he was about 4. So the next time he comes, he goes, Papa J, where's Huxley? And I'm totally oblivious to it. So I was going to show him in the mirror, you're Huxley. Kind of thing. No, he goes to the journal and he opens the journal up because he wanted to find his name. He doesn't know how to spell yet. He's probably now at 5-ish, getting better. But I thought, how interesting. They need to know that we pray for them. That's something we can all do.
yeah. I'll say this. I've told some grandparents this that can't see their kids till they're 18, or
Yeah. Wow.
and the whole boundary thing is that Vicky and I get a new Bible every year. We read all the way through the Bible for a person. We've done all of our grandchildren. We're finishing up our last 2 grandchildren right now. We just had another one, so we're going to have to do him also. But in that Bible, we journal
Oh my
our
gosh.
prayers every day in our Bible reading of what we think about, know about, wish and hope and pray for that particular
You're
kid.
amazing.
And so then we give that to them the next Christmas.
Wow.
And they're young and they're looking for toys, not Bibles, but one day they're going to read through that
Love that.
and see where we
No,
prayed,
no.
So I would tell grandparents that you can't physically see your kids, or even distance see them, to start writing a journal, be
Yeah, that's great.
positive and thank
Yeah,
God for them every day. Because when
so
they
good.
get 18 or 19 on their own and they wonder why you didn't never come see me, or why you didn't,
Right.
instead of saying, well, your stinking mom and dad wouldn't let me do it, but here's what I did for you every
Yeah,
day.
so good. Oh man, that's a gift. That's so good. Listen, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. All things Dudley Chancey, Dr. Dudley Chancey, I should say. All things Dr. Dudley Chancey are on our podcast notes today. You can pick up his book. It's called Keep Faith Alive, Grandparents and a Godly Legacy. You know what? In my mind, when I look at my own life now, there's nothing more important than this. So don't forget to take a look at the book. And again, you can get more information on his great work and the great guy that he is in our podcast notes. We'll be right back. Do not go away. Hi, Jim Burns here. I am so excited about what's going on at Homeward. Some of you are just learning that things are changing around here, and one of the most exciting things changing is our new president, Marcus. And Marcus, tell us what's going on with Homeward.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Really appreciate it. So excited to share with you, give you a glimpse of what God is doing in this new season at Homeward. And it's a blend. It's a blend of new and tried and true. And our mission right now is, how do we take these 4 decades, these 40 years of ministry, of resources, of principles that God has been changing lives throughout the nation and beyond, and expand that, but also tether it to a younger generation. And the way we're going to do that is through a blend of tried and true resources and principles and events, as well as new initiatives. And I'll start off with the new. On the new side, we have a new website. We are rebranding. We've got new staff. We've got new faces and new voices to our growing social media presence, and that is wonderful. But also on the tried and true side, we've got a Refreshing Your Marriage retreat that has been an amazing, impactful event. We've got our conferences like Trainer for Trainers and our resources like our books that we're going to continue to write and expand and change lives. Speaking of which, Jim, share with us the latest update of what's going on in the book world here at
You got
Homeward.
it. And I'm excited about your leadership, and I'm excited about where we're going at Homeward. It's going to be pretty incredible. We've got a book, Doing Life with Your Adult Children. We have other books, of course, but that's still on the bestseller list after 5 years. Even this month, it's on the bestseller list. And now there's a new one that's going to be coming out called When Your Adult Child Strays, Trading Heartache for Hope. And I'm doing this book right now, and there's going to be a course with it. And we have other books on sexuality and things like that that are really, really making a difference all around this world.
So with all the things going on right now at Homeward, here's what you can do. God is putting in our heart this desire and this plan to expand our Refreshing Your Marriage conference that I recently attended, and it helped my wife and I have a breakthrough that God was working in our hearts for a while. But beyond that, I saw other couples experiencing the same thing. So we are going to expand our Refreshing Your Marriage conference, take it to other cities, and we want to be able to not only help make sure that happens, but also those that can't afford it, that need to be resourced and some scholarships. So we want to make sure nobody misses out on a chance to get their marriage refreshed and to draw closer to the Lord. So I'm asking you to make a special gift above and beyond to support that. Thank you so much, Homeward.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. Again, great conversation today with my good friend, Dr. Dudley Chancey. He's written that great book, Keep Faith Alive. And again, this is going to be a two-part series because we've got Wayne Rice coming on next time for the podcast to talk about long-distance grandparenting.
Good
And
book.
it's a great book. And I know he's a good friend of yours too. Dudley, I want you to talk about how grandparents, you mentioned this, how they can share their faith story in creative ways. I remember laying on the bed, and James and Charlotte in my life, and we're just laying on the bed. They're getting ready for bed. I'm in the middle of them because they're kind of being punks that night. And I just told them my testimony. And I thought, I wonder what they think about this. You know, I was 16. I wasn't raised in the church like you guys are. I'd never been to church when I was your age, blah, blah, blah. And they were really enamored by it. It was really fascinating. They listened, but then they asked a couple of kind of fun questions. For me, when I read your section on that, and you talked about it a little bit earlier, it really wasn't. I realized how important it is to share our faith story. You were talking about a woman who did a study on this and how critical it is. How can parents, grandparents especially, do that? And like, I've got a testimony because I became a Christian. I was not we all become Christians, but I wasn't raised in the church, so I had some of that kind of stuff. But how do they do that? What do they do? Do they write it out first before they talk? How do they do that?
Yeah, the first time we ever did this for our sons, Focus on the Family had a book about
Yeah,
the father's story and the mother's
I
story.
remember that.
I bought two of those. I mean, it was pretty intimidating because there's some things you don't want to tell
Yeah,
your kids,
oh,
and it's
sure.
like it's right there. But that's part of who you are, and it's redeeming in the sense of I did that. I'm not proud of that, but thank God for Jesus.
Hmm.
Thank God for the
Yeah,
church, for people
yeah,
that surround you, and that's why Jesus is important, but your church is important, and we want you to know our
yeah,
elders in our church, because I might do something stupid again one day,
yeah.
and these are the men. When our boys both turned 13, I flew in my accountability partners,
Very good.
and they flew from Tennessee,
Mm,
Texas,
mm,
and some other places. They each brought an item to
yeah,
give to my sons to say, you know, and they spent an hour just with my son by
yeah,
themselves
right,
saying, and basically then Vicky and I spent an hour with them on that same day saying, if we mess up, these four men
right.
are your fathers.
Yeah,
If we die, these four
mm,
men are your
yeah,
fathers. You don't have to worry about being left alone or
right.
whatever, because these men
Mm,
are as good or better than we are, and they spent that hour telling them their faith story. So they've heard several of those plus
mm,
ours, and it was easy to do in that book because we weren't, especially me being the dad, I can talk to 10,000 teenagers and you can't talk to your own two boys,
Right, right.
sometimes. But that book helped me walk through with them my faith story.
Yeah.
Uh, and now I'm excited about Don Greenwood's thing that you can go online and fill that thing out and put uh, type in it. You can put audio in it. You can put pictures and video in it
Yeah.
and tell your faith story. I have told grandparents this. I spoke to about 100 grandparents at Harding University last week, and I said, if you've not done this and you're long distance or whatever, get your iPhone out and just put it there and walk through and tell your faith story to your
Good.
iPhone.
No, it's really good.
Uh,
Yeah, there's so many ways to do that.
yeah,
We were talking about our mutual friend Wayne. He actually wrote a book just for his grandkids. I mean, I got one. A couple of his buddies, we snuck some, but he had photos in it. But it was a really well done, and it kind of said, "Here's my life."
yeah,
So even when he is gone, his grandkids have that legacy, and part of it is his testimony. He talked about when he became a Christian and how he became a Christian, but it's also, and here's what I was interested in, and I played for this bluegrass group here, and I did this and I did that, and I was a part of youth specialties and all these things that you and I are a part of with him. But what a blessing to do, and
yeah,
it doesn't have that was a book. It literally could be talking into an iPhone and or typing something up. But
yeah,
yeah, I think we need to do that. I said to him when he did the book. I don't think I want to do a book, but I need to do better at that. I think telling the faith story is really key. They need to know they're part of a bigger story. When you look at the Old Testament, it talks about from generation to generation. So it's the parents and the next generation and the next generation. You see this in Deuteronomy. You see this in the Psalms. All throughout, and it gives kids a understanding that they're a part of something bigger than just trying to go to school on Thursday and
yes,
do their
yeah,
homework and watch something something on YouTube or whatever. So yeah, faith story. I hope that's a takeaway for many of our people. Now, like I said, and we talked about this, and we talked about the grandfathers. You have an entire chapter on it, and usually I hear more about the praying grandma.
yeah,
And what you said earlier today is you're talking about grandfathers being, more. Oftentimes they can have more the empathy and care as they get older, and that does make sense. Did you have a praying grandfather? Was your grandfather somebody who built a legacy into your life?
No, I never knew any of my
Yeah,
grandparents, and
interesting.
and
Here you are writing this book, and yet you didn't have that experience really
yeah,
either. Yeah.
yeah. But it was amazing asking those college students, tell me about your grandmother and
Yeah.
grandfather, and they would start with grandfather. And of course, these were students at two Christian universities, so they're mostly Christian, I
Sure.
guess you could
Sure.
say. But they
Sure.
would talk about seeing their grandfather preaching, or seeing their grandfather leading singing, or
Mm,
seeing their grandfather praying, or seeing their grandfather actually physically build the church that became their church.
yeah.
Doing work, and it all centered around church and that
Right.
community and
Right.
whatever. And if we ever needed a generation to love the church again,
Yeah.
we got to figure out how to do that with Gen Z and these other Gen
Right.
Alpha. But these particular students saw that,
We kept looking
and
at that as key. Yeah.
and it carried over in the home. Seeing
Mhm.
Grandpa take his
Yeah.
Bible out and
No, really. It's
all
it.
that. So
And that's the father thing too. I mean, if
yeah,
dads
oh
stay
yeah,
in the church, then their kids are going to stay in the church. If grandpas have a biblical worldview, if grandpas talk about it, then again, it gives the freedom, especially to some of those sons and grandsons. It gives the freedom for them to say, you know what, I can be. I mean, grandpa's my hero, my dad's my hero, or whatever, as opposed to my dad plays a really good golf game on Sunday morning or whatever, and
right,
kind
yeah,
of just doesn't do that. Now, you also had a chapter on grandmothers, and you referred to it because you had some help with that. Grandmas seem to be, it just seems to come more natural to them.
yeah.
What can a grandma do to make a difference in their grandkids' lives, just even on an individual basis? Not like you and Vicky, pray with everybody and those kind of things, but what can a grandma do that really can make an impact on their grandchildren's lives?
Well, I think once again, the Deuteronomy 6 thing, everything you do, there has a spiritual implication. And my example has been watching Vicky's mom. She was the only grandparent our boys had.
Hmm.
Uh, they would go out and shoot 22 rifles together with their grandma when she was
Oh
80.
my gosh.
And, and she would
I
sit
love
there and
that.
talk about Jesus in between
Yeah.
shots, and then,
It's
but
awesome.
watching Vicky be a grandparent to our 5 kids she is phenomenal, and they sew together, they make cookies together, they swim together, they went pumpkin hunting yesterday
Oh, yeah.
together, and she wears me out.
Yeah.
I would just be going, "Hey, we don't have to do all this." And and we're blessed. Our grandkids live 2 miles from us,
Yeah.
both families. And so we see them every day if we want to,
Right.
or not. But I think every time she gets a chance, she's there. And if our kids say, "Is there any way you could?" She's like, "Yes." They don't even. She doesn't even. And so she's available. The whole thing about being available. And I think once again, I would encourage your people, please read Wayne's book about long distance grandparenting, because there's so many things you can do and the word is present. uh,
Right.
God's very big about being present in his people's life,
Right.
and our opportunities to be present in our children and grandchildren's lives. You can't replace that. And I'm very thankful. I mean, even when I was gone to youth specialties and things like that, I would call back in, and the boys and Vicky would be on the bed at 10 o'clock at night, and we'd do our thing, so that
Oh
we
my
only
God.
had pay phones back then, but
Sure.
it still worked.
Sure. No,
Um,
that's awesome. You have a phrase that you use. You say the power of intergenerational living. What does that mean? You also used a phrase, power of intergenerational grandparenting. Help us understand how we do this well. You talked about at the beginning, kind of how do we mix that to do, because people, it seems to me that kids who have uh, the privilege to have their grandparents in kind of an intergenerational living way, your grandkids who are close by, whatever, that really is a blessing. How do you proactively do that?
yeah. I think you read a lot about it. I was blessed to read a lot of Wayne's work, and as he became from youth ministry to senior citizen ministry,
Right. Right.
and then what Dr. Ron Bruner and I talk about in some of our other books
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
writings is intentional
Mhm.
intergenerational
Yes.
ministry.
Yeah.
How do we be our favorite thing to do, and we do it most Friday nights or this past week we did it on Sunday night, but the whole mom, dad, the kids,
Mm.
us, everybody, and uh, if our daughter-in-law's parents can come, they come. We eat a meal together.
Mm.
We play games together. We do s'mores together, or we watch a movie together. We do pot.
Mm.
I mean, and it's all of those
Oh,
generations
right.
there together. Um, and we miss that in the church. And I think you probably would agree with me, back in the old
Yeah.
days of siloing out youth ministry instead of
Exactly.
putting
No.
everybody together.
No, they needed to get somewhere. They need to get to know other people's grandparents, other
Yeah,
people's parents, things
yeah,
like that. No, I
yeah,
agree. I love that just the illustration of coming together when you can. Again, some people can't, but there are other ways to do that. We don't have much time left, but you say that one of the roles of grandparents, and I loved how you explained this, because we don't have a job description. We don't. I mean, there is a job description in the scripture, passing faith along from generation to generation. But you say that in a grandchild's life, they are, or the grandparents are oftentimes historian, hero, mentor, role model, nurturer, and wizard. I love that phrase, the added wizard. Talk about that broader role that a grandparent can play.
yeah. I think, and once again, you read the book, you're one of those, or sometimes you're a combination of those.
Yeah.
It talks about sometimes you're the fun grandparent. Anything goes, and then sometimes you're the, uh, we don't do that, and you have, once again, those boundaries of your kid. You got to respect those kind of things to do that. But I think the finding out what your gifts are and who you are
Yeah.
and what you can bring to your giftedness to your children. I mean, one of the things that we're already talking to our older grandchildren about is let me tell you what God has done for that using my gifts,
Mm.
uh, planning events and empowering people to be all they can be. Our big deal is missions in Honduras. We've already got our
Mm.
kids' photos made. They're getting their passports. They're going to go this next summer,
Yay. Yay.
and doing those kind of things. And once again, that's intergenerational. The whole family's going.
Sure.
Um, but I think figuring out, I don't want to just be the old guy that I got all the money and whatever I say goes kind of thing, But I've slowly backed off. Like in November, everybody's going to Disney World.
Yay.
I didn't plan one thing.
That's cool.
I I'm going as a helper or a diaper changer, whatever I need to be.
Are you a
And
banker also is the question? A little bit. Are
uh,
you banking some of this for 'em?
I got one of my granddaughter says, "Papa D, use that plastic thing." You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, we do some of that. But we've
Yeah. Great.
also, our kids, they know they pay. And I write my oldest granddaughter every Monday. I write her a letter,
Mm,
and I put
yeah.
money in it. And I've started putting Honduras money in it. She thinks she's rich because these $500 bills, they're like $10.
Ah,
But I'm
awesome.
telling her, you got to have this when you go next summer,
I love it.
and then the rest of it's for Disney
Yeah.
World. And so they're learning to save and do
Oh,
all
that's
that kind
neat.
of stuff.
And those are the kinds of things, those in between this conversation, we talked about research and we talked about some of this other, but in between, you're just giving some great wisdom. I mean, write your kids. I mean, how many grandkids ever get a note from grandma and grandpa? They may now with an email or a text, but what about a card? How do you do, doing those kinds of things? I mean, that's a beautiful thing. Wow. Dudley, time has gone by too fast. Thank you so much. You have been so inspiring today to us. I really appreciate it.
Well, we love you and love Homeward.
Yeah. Well, and don't forget to go get his book. It's called Keep Faith Alive, Godparents and a Godly Legacy. There it is on the YouTube channel. You can see it. It'll also, all of that is in all of our podcast show notes. And please go there and get to know more about what Dudley's doing. And by the way, if you're a grandparent and you know other people who are grandparents, then send this one on. We're going to do a 2-part series. He mentioned Wayne. We kept talking about Wayne's World. Wayne Rice has written a book called Long Distant Grandparenting, and he, who's a mutual friend, he's on next week. So you want to hear about Wayne, and you'll get to hear him play a little bluegrass with Johnny Cash as well. But before we go, I wanted to add one role. I was thinking about this and I smiled when I saw the role, when he was going through the roles, as we just talked about. You could be the historian, the hero, the inventor, the mentor, the role model, on and on and on. Well, I've got one more, and I didn't see it coming. As Papa J, the grandpa, I am also a little bit the sex educator. Let me explain. So my daughter Christy calls me up. They were living in Dallas at the time. And she goes, "Dad, I am freaked out. James, age 3.5, by the way, he's asking questions about sex. And I don't have a thing to say." Well, I said, "Well, Christy, we kind of talked to you about that." She goes, "Yeah. And when you did, your bald head sweat and your ears turn red and you stuttered. So I don't want to do it that way. Don't you have a book or something on it, like for 3 to 5-year-olds?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do. I have a book called God Made Your Body." She said, "Good. Send it right away." So I was so excited that my daughter wanted to actually read the book to James that I overnighted it. It cost me $21. The book cost probably $10, and I sent her it cost me $21 to get it there. 2 weeks later, I show up. I was speaking in Fort Worth, I think. And there was Christy and her husband, Steve, and James and baby Charlotte at the time. And, we greet at the door. There's hugs, there's love. And all of a sudden she goes, "Hey, Steve, you know where that children's book is that Dad sent James?" I thought, well, that's a weird way to say it. "It's the one with the white cover. Bring it. He needs to read it to James." And I was looking at my daughter and I go, "What, you didn't read it?" "Oh, no, that's your job, Dad." So anyway, James and I go off and we read the book, and it was the worst handoff ever for sex education, I'm sure. So today, James is now 10, and he's my big buddy. And my son-in-law, Steve, calls me up this week. And this is, I think, because I was reading Dudley's book again this week, the second time I've read it. And anyway, he says, "So I got a story to tell you. We think we're ready to talk to James about sexuality." He's 10. I mean, really, literally, they do need to have that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
I always say 100 1-minute conversations are better than 100. But anyways, So I told James, this is Steve telling me, Mommy and I want to have that discussion with you, and we'll have it this week. And James goes, oh, I want Papa J to be there too. So Steve goes, you got to be with us here.
Yeah.
And so apparently we have an appointment. We haven't had it yet, but we have an appointment to talk about sex with James, my daughter and her husband, and they need me to be a part of it. But you know what's funny about it is I remember that, as a grandparent, part of my job is to build a legacy of love and faith, but even when it comes to morals and values. And so
Yeah.
what I'm saying to you is look for those hidden opportunities to have an influence and an impact. And by the way, if you're listening to this podcast, you can pray for me because I probably will still be stuttering. My bald head will be sweating, and I'll have my ears turning red. Harder for my grandson, I think, than when I was talking to my own kids. So anyway, that's it. Thanks so much for being with us. Thanks to Dudley. He's a great guy. What a wonderful man. And I just love that we keep pumping out things for generational family ministry. So get behind this. Read his book. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns.